afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Leanne with Marketing. I am here with Darren Lauda. He is the CEO of Outset, and he is a wealth of information and knowledge. Darren, I'm just going to have you kick us off with telling us a bit about your background.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I'm the CEO of a software company based here in Southern California. We call ourselves Outset, and we try to help people get their go to market plans right from the outset. That's the origin of the name. Um, I'm a father of two kids. One's a wildland firefighter. My other is going to Clemson University, and she is sure they're going to win the ACC championship this weekend, even though they're a long shot. And my wife is in software sales too. I've been in software since I got out of the Army a long, long time ago. When I got out of the Army, the world wanted me to be a security guard. And I found my way to a software company and became the receptionist so I could get my way into the door while I went to college at night. That started my career. And I've worked at companies really big like Salesforce and PTC, and really small like MavenLink and now Outset, which I started pre-revenue.
Awesome. That is that is quite a journey. And I think that with that there's a lot of like learning that happens. And yeah, I've definitely seen people with a similar story where the world wants them to be a security guard. And they're like, no, I got more to offer. We need security guards.
For sure.
Very valuable, not discrediting anyone's hard work in any way, shape, or form. Um, but I love that you saw your strengths and you're like, this is, my core competencies, and this is what I'm going to go for. And I think that kind of um goal orientation is one of the many many reasons why we're here today, because we all have goals, and the way that we get to our goals can be a determining factor of if we actually reach them or not.
Sure.
And so one of the I wasn't as aware about the your military experience, but one of the things the military does really well is teamwork.
Yes.
And today we're going to talk about breaking down silos, using data. And with that comes teamwork. So, kind of piggyback off that, outside is its own thing, but and teamwork is its own thing. But how do you see this going down? Like what is the big strategic marketing thing that you think people need to know related to this?
Yeah, great question. For me, it is the idea that as we're operating the go to market function broadly, marketing and sales have to team very well together, and finance has to be a part of that team. And I think that as people plan campaigns and spending and hiring, we get into a point too often where marketing has a plan and sales has a plan, and finance is updating the company financial plan every single month, but the three aren't working in tandem. They're not aligned. There are different data sets supporting each plan. Everybody's got their own spreadsheet. And it's a lot of really well intended work leads to a really messy view of how to optimize the go to market flow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's that, you know, everyone's right in their own regard. It's
Mhm.
not that anyone's wrong. It's just that it's incomplete.
It's incomplete and it's changing. One of my favorite quotes, I use it all the time, and it became more relevant finally because Mike Tyson actually had a fight recently. Not much of a fight, but everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So we collectively as go-to-market teams are going through a planning cycle probably right now, trying to build our plan for next year. And there's going to be this one overarching goal that's set. But when you get into January and February, oftentimes marketing has its plan that it's running and sales has its plan that it's running, and maybe account management the same. Like I said, the finance plan changes every month when they close the books. And it just gets continually more and more messy, super problematic. And then because we got punched in the face, to use my silly analogy, we're all changing our behavior trying to fix a right now problem. How do I fix this month? We don't have enough meetings. How can marketing help or change? What can the SDRs do? Right? We get into all these really difficult gyrations and start solving for unique departmental problems as opposed to the whole of the revenue factory.
Yeah, and it is a holistic factory, right? Like one part isn't separate. Even though people feel like they're part of an octopus arm, their
Mhm.
arm is their arm and everything attaches at one central location, but that's who cares.
Yeah.
Um It's not like that. It's a web. It's dependent on each other. And when you start to have a company that is siloed like that so heavily, where they think that you could just chop off an arm and keep living, you're into some pretty major problems.
Totally agree. And even when sales and marketing are working really well together, finance is still usually pretty separate. I was just talking to a CMO this morning, and one of her comments was, I seek budget for a campaign or something else, and finance brings in a set of assumptions. I don't know where they came from. I don't know who modeled those, how'd they get there. It doesn't make any sense. Where did that come from? Um, and that's why it's so important to really align teams across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you shared that example about a CMO talking to finance, because at the end of the day, someone's talking to finance, even if it's not you, it's your boss or your boss's boss, and if nobody's talking to finance, the board of advisors wants to know what's happening with
Yes.
finance. Um, can you think of like a very concrete story that kind of like supports the best case scenario for this strategy, like it going in an ideal way?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the pain associated with the story and how it led us to getting to the ideal point. I worked for a company some time ago. It was a fantastic growth story. Went from zero to $100 million right here in Southern California. The team that I worked with there, um, we kind of were really proud of our growth, and we knew that growth was kind of covering all sins because we kept making mistakes. We hired a bunch of SDRs. Oops, hired way too many. Um, Next quarter's pipeline looked a little bit light, so we spent way too much on ads and PPC, and we were inefficient. We kept spending dollars really inefficiently because we weren't aligned, and that would manifest itself in a board meeting. Actually, in a board meeting, when the CMO came in and said, "Marketing crushed it, lead volume is high, pipeline created is amazing. Sales, we missed our bookings by 10%," right? There's a disconnect there, right? The story isn't holding together. You have two parallel paths. So we were living that model. We had to contract the sales team because we hired too much. We had to overspend on PPC to try to feed. At any rate, across this growth cycle, which again led to a great exit point, we quantified $6 million of inefficient sales and marketing spend in 1 year. Now, do we lose all that money? No. But could we have spent it a lot better? Heck yes. And we knew we had to go solve that problem, and we knew we needed help from finance to do it.
I love that, because so often the assumption is that if it wasn't completely like wasted, that you aren't leaving money on the table. And leaving a huge chunk of money on the table is just as big a sin as blowing it completely.
Yes.
And that's when you start to buy into the concept of efficiency, and not growth at all costs, but growth at all reasonable measures to have a long-term business with short-term
Yes.
wins. Uh,
Precisely.
I have clearly drinking that Kool-Aid. Um, but I think that there are a number of ways to do this, and beyond cross-functional like discussions and meetings, right?
Mhm.
Because we could have meetings, but it's what's in those meetings that change whether it's collaboration and it's breaking down silos,
Yeah.
versus it's just, I emailed you the spreadsheet, didn't you look at it?
Yes.
So tell me more about what you think the ideal way to break down these silos that are very problematic, that do result with people getting laid off, that do have, business implications that lead to personal implications.
Yeah.
What is the way to not end up in that shit?
Sure. So I'll give you an example of somebody I talked to yesterday, a CRO, who thought they were doing it pretty well. And then I'll talk to you about how we actually solved the problem at the company I worked with, if that makes sense. So I did talk to a CRO yesterday, and he very proudly stated, "I bring stakeholders for all demand gen functions together once a month. So I've got marketing representatives for my inbound flows. I've got partner representatives. I've got the SDR representatives, which happen to sit inside of marketing in this particular instance. Um, I've got the selling leadership. We all get to a room, into a room the first Monday of every month, and we go over all the inputs and we see how it's working." I said, well, great. Where does the data come from? Well, it's in spreadsheets. They show it to me in spreadsheets. Well, who assembles the spreadsheet? Well, there's one ops analyst who creates the marketing spreadsheet, then somebody creates the sales spreadsheet. Um, okay, well, what is finance? Well, finance doesn't come to the meeting, right? So then you start thinking, okay, a lot of people are getting together and talking about stuff, but are you truly and really aligned? And I think we can trick ourselves into thinking we're aligned because we're having the meetings, but we can still be off, right? So what we did in this prior company that I worked for, we got finance involved, and we said we want your help building cohorts that analyze leads from awareness to booking, right? All the way across, not discrete measurement of lead performance, but leads all the way across to booking dimensionally by channel, by segment, by geography. And we built these really great cohort models. We augmented them with Python and R and scripting languages. And we could use those to begin to predict what was going to happen in the business. And what was nice is the finance person was involved with the sales leadership and the marketing leadership. So they began to understand every single conversion point in that flow, and were great partners. They even began to see the leading indicators. Oh, wait a minute. This conversion point isn't working. Here's the impact downstream. That worked really well for us, having them there, using cohorts to do it. And what finance got out of it that made them really want to be there and invest was they got the win of the bookings. They could apply machine learning constructs that say, okay, if this thing hits the top of the funnel in this dimension, channel, segment, source, it should hit booking in this month, and flow through in the cohort models that way. Super powerful. So now finance is happy. They got the win of return on investment. We're happy because they're on board and partners. We're all sitting in a room together working on one data set.
Yeah. And that's, gosh, that matters so much because it does. It does. It matters because you have the people spending a lot of money, you got the people bringing in the money, and you
Yep.
got the people that have to manage the money. So,
Yeah.
yes, there are, like, internal operational outflows, and that's where the bulk of business costs go, is that marketing is really only 10% of the costs of doing business, up to 25% if you're in a high growth state.
Sure.
But how do you even figure out if there is 10%? You gotta have the people that are bringing the money in, and then you gotta have the people that manage the money because they're the ones that balance, okay, if we have, this seasonality in like
Mhm.
component. Let's
Yeah.
say that every June is our peak hiring season, and if we're gonna have a head count, it's gonna be in June, or we have to close the books by January, or there's a lot that goes into everyone's jobs, and just because we don't see it because we are in our jobs
Yep.
doesn't mean we don't know what they do all day. They do a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. In particular, finance, they go through financial close at the end of every month.
Mhm.
I know this is a marketing centric kind of conversation, but finance is so critical. Finance closes the books every month, and they have to report to the board, investors, and the CEO what the next 11 months are going to look like, the next 10 and the 9 and 8 as
Yeah.
things go through. Every time they're doing that, they're looking for unfavorable variances that have to be filled, right? So when we come in and say we want budget for this campaign or this sales hire, the finance person is going, oh, but I have these three unfavorable variances, which might not even be the go-to-market team's fault. Maybe we overhired in product or we took on a new initiative. Money still disappeared. So having finance in the room each time that you're going through these models and saying, hey, by the way, here are some changes. I anticipate marketing having to cut a bit of funding out of this campaign next month, the month after. We can start to plan and we can start to work together when we have kind of this open dialogues about what's happening inside the business.
Yeah, and I think that having a seat at that table matters because of what you're saying, but then to take it one step further is that when it's less reactionary and more proactive, we all of a sudden have real strategy. We all of
Yes.
a sudden can be like, look, these are our top priorities given this amount of budget. Here's what we need to do differently. Here's what we can and cannot do. And when you save money by being able to plan ahead. This is something you could pry out of my cold dead hands. But
Yep.
when you don't have to create something and then get it revised and then have additional billable hours or man hours to completely scrap something and then start over because your budget's changed or your platforms have changed, or whenever you can be planning ahead, you can be more efficient, and then you aren't spending the same dollars twice.
I
Um,
love that completely. I think I might have interrupted you there. I'm sorry. But planning ahead is so important to me. When I talk to a CRO in particular, I say if at least 10% of your time isn't devoted to bookings in a month, at least 6 months from now, you're probably making a mistake. When we built that model with finance at the company I worked for, when we got through $50 million, we had 3 analysts working on this. It was a pretty heavy lift, but we could predict bookings 24 months into the future with a plus or minus 5% degree of variance. It was super powerful. Now, did we have to react when we got punched in the mouth when something changed? Sure. But I could see right now, oh, wow, it's December. What are we on? December 4th? I've got a gap to goal in May of next year. Guess what? Now is when I spend efficiently to solve for that gap. And guess what? Finance is sitting next to me talking about that gap and ideating what kind of monies we can free up to close it. Right. So I'm not going hat in hand asking for money later. I'm doing it with them. It was really powerful.
yeah, yeah. And I think that there's also this part of it where if we get like really into our business person mindset and we think to ourselves, well, you shouldn't be doing stuff that is just frivolous spending anyways. Well,
Mhm.
there's a difference between um moonshots, long shots, experimentation budgets, big plays, little plays, and they all have different amounts of risk versus reward.
Yep.
But you can't make the high risk, high reward plays if you don't have budget for it.
Correct.
And that can dramatically change what your marketing strategy or your sales strategy, therefore, looks like. And then to balance that alignment between the two, if you do like a huge play for marketing, but you don't have the person power to deal with those demos, to deal with those bookings, to answer those phones, to do those appointments, you've just wasted a ton of money. So like there needs to be um this cross department planning, and it's not just, oh, marketing, you get this much budget, make sure you don't spend it all on fonts and colors. Like
Yes.
guys, like we're more than that. And this is where you get the real business savvy marketers in financial planning and CROs that really get how businesses function
Mhm.
in order to pull the right levers.
Yeah, completely agree. And like on the marketing side, for my sales too, but on the marketing side in particular, I like to think of it as a cocktailing effect. And I started calling it that because in a past life, different role, we got hung up on return on advertising spend, what we could tie directly to a channel. And we said, oh, this channel is way outperforming all the others. So let's rob from all of their channels and feed that one. Guess what? That channel started to degrade because sometimes the brand building and the fonts and colors kind of stuff, to borrow your words, is actually helping to feed everything else. And when finance can see all those things working together, hey, we cut here and conversion rates started to fall already. The finance brain can start going, oh, let me plumb that through to future pipeline. Holy cow, we just created a gap. All of a sudden, it makes more sense to them than, hey, they're just spending on brand building and fonts.
Yeah, and you absolutely have to keep your brand's colors and fonts current.
Mhm.
And you have to have that as an evolution. I know, and I'm saying this to defend the CMO that comes in and does a rebrand, because sometimes you just need to do it.
Oh,
If
sure.
you're it gets a bad rap, but if your website and your, branding is outdated or doesn't reflect the customers as well as you now know that it should, it's
Yep.
gotta evolve and stay current. It's just it's part of the beast.
For sure. It could also be online ads, right? We started to decrease spend on online ads. Lo and behold, SDR outbound productivity decreased, right? Somehow we got less awareness, right? Are we seeing the interconnectivity of these things? Um, can we see how it all cocktails and then notice when we pull down on something what the other impacts are? If we pull down and nothing else happens, great, put the money in the better spot. But usually you can only pull down so far before you start breaking other things.
Yeah, and it's highly dependent on where you're pulling down from.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
Um So so we're talking about making sure that we're having data informed decisions with this model. And whenever it comes to this, and I spoke on this on a different person's podcast that will be aired at a later date. But there's this idea of data literacy. How much data literacy needs to be involved with this cross-functional, like data-driven strategy?
If by literacy we're talking about making sure that we all are working from the same playbook of definitions, making sure we're all understanding every single calculation, we're in lockstep agreement on it, I think that's critically important. Um, I've been in a situation before where I was the sales leader and the marketing leader, and I had different definitions of MQL. Right, a simple little thing like that threw off both our presentations. Um, so making sure we have the same agreed upon data set across the board, making sure that we have the same definitions across the board, making sure that if somebody says, hey, I need to measure differently for a certain reason, we say, okay, do that, but make it an outlier in the model that we can look at separately and know that we're all following this flow through our bow tie at a very specific way with very specific definitions. I think that's critical. Then it's kind of how do you work through the data. I'm a big fan of using machine learning and going very deep, algorithmically building forecasts that go out 24 months into the future, understanding what math is being applied, how much of it's in a black box, what is kind of straight machine learning, what gets more creative, right? How is the math changing? I am not a math major, but I always want to know enough about how the calculations work so I can go, okay, I understand that it holds water, I'll stick to it. Or I don't think it's right and I'll watch it, but I'm gonna let it run until we have to change it. I want to have that idea of each point of measurement and make sure the whole team understands that and is there at the definitions.
Yeah, yeah. Defining the variables is mission critical.
Yeah.
Because back to what you said is that if you've got one department using it one way and another department using it different way, then you're no longer aligned. You're just doing your own thing, rocking and rolling. And then therefore your results aren't apples to apples anymore either.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that that's where like the data literacy and the like how you're using data in the end, like what story you're telling, that there needs to be that apples to apples to apples. This means this, it only means this, it can only mean that. It
Yep.
cannot mean X, Y, and Z. Would you say that like misunderstanding data or what are some of the ways that like someone can miss the point entirely with what you're saying?
Misunderstanding the data, not taking the time to really understand it is a big one. Not understanding the conversion points. I like to say that a CFO, maybe a senior finance leader, somebody has to know every conversion point and what all those definitions are. If I'm going to give $100,000 to a campaign, for example, I want to know what a lead means. I want to know what a qualified lead means because those are my leading indicators to bookings, revenue, and cash, right? So as a finance leader, why wouldn't I want to know what all those definitions are? And why wouldn't I have somebody looking to understand it? Hey, folks, I gave you 100K. We expected this many conversions at this point. We're getting 1.2x that. Do you want more money? That's a great problem to have. Hey, we're getting 0.7. Not working. The ROI is fading away. What are we going to do? Right. So I think everybody has to understand the definition of each conversion point, the calculation for each metric at the highest level, if we're going to work together cross-functionally.
Yeah. And then what about going backwards? Because one common complaint that marketing I've heard say about finance is that
Mhm.
they just don't get how marketing works. They're too literal. It's not a gumball machine. You don't put in $5 in and you get $20 out.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's a very real problem that marketers face. It's challenging. Um, Again, I'm being kind of redundant here, but what does the finance team want? They don't care about bookings that much, which is kind of heresy to say. They want revenue and cash, right? That's what they need. Revenue. They got to pay the bills, keep the lights on. They want revenue and cash. And so when we express something as awareness or a lead, or something that's actually really important overall, but that's the ending point of the expression, the finance brain struggles. And so this natural combative model gets in. One of the things that we've done recently and in a past life is we started building a model that finance can understand that wasn't hyper complex, but we measured kind of what I would call state movement rather than stage movement. Finance is used to saying, how many opportunities do we have? What's the value? We said, wait a minute, how are things moving from awareness to lead to qualified lead to opportunity to disposition, meaning end of cohort life or closed, won, or lost? Once finance could see that flow, right, that's when they got the comfort with, okay, investing in these things over here actually does make things go through that funnel better and make them convert more clearly. So instead of saying this is our stage 2 opportunity, our stage 3 with an MQL in front of it, we're looking at this broader flow based on cohorts. When finance can say the money that I spent in January of last year is now returning like this in December, right? All those things come together, I think, to create a much better dialogue between marketing, sales, and finance. But I fully acknowledge marketing has one of the harder jobs. It's one of the easiest things to challenge because it's sometimes hardest to tangibly tackle and say, this campaign led to that, because you can get into the attribution wars, which I avoid like crazy. Was that an inbound click or was that an SDR outbound call? What are we doing here? Right? Those things are wars that I try to avoid like the plague.
Yeah, attribution wars are real. Like, you wanna talk about Sith overlords. Jeez. Um, like, it's so difficult to get that, and I feel like sometimes the people holding the purse strings are part of how we end up in the attribution wars, because they only feel that, and from their point of view, I get how they got there. They
Yep.
only feel that if we can, in this really risk averse way, say gumball machine theory, I put $5 here, it gets me $20 out. That's
Yep.
beautiful. That's wrapped up in a nice little bow. Everyone has a plan until you're punched in the face.
Yeah.
That's not how people work.
Exactly right. Look, and look, if it was that easy, if we could just hire an SDR to do 20 calls a day and get us this many meetings, life would be great. But again, that's not how it works at all. Everything works together in an interlocking way. And I'm saying something very basic that I think every marketer gets. But everything that's happening upstream in marketing needs to flow through to sales. And we have to be able to bring it all together and present it to finance in a way that makes sense. Finance is always probably going to twitch a little bit. Do I have to spend this much money on awareness? Can we spend it somewhere else? I could hire 2 developers. I could do these other things with it. But if sales and marketing are working hand in hand, using that right data set, having those cohort flows, showing the conversion points, look, this is humming. And we can now use data to prove that if we put in X more, 1.2X more comes out, right? If we can start showing that in a really meaningful way, and I can't overemphasize this enough, it can't be sales and marketing going like this in the process. They have to be together more tightly than ever before finance will ever buy into the flow and look at all those CRs moving through the bow tie.
Yeah, you gotta be that unified front. You gotta be
Yes,
that two-parent team.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
I'm the hard part is that the way that departments view each other, right?
Mhm.
So I'm definitely taking the devil's advocate. I'm not saying I view finance like this. I'm very team finance. I love you guys. I understand your needs.
Yep,
Um, but where it goes too far is the ends of the spectrum, right? Finance can mess up their job in 2 ways royally. One, they could not care at all
yep,
about every dollar and cents. They could just loosey goosey. Yeah, we got a finance guy. Well, it's off on the golf course, right?
yep,
The other way they can mess it up is just holding too tight to the purse strings and being so risk averse that there is no risk versus reward. It's just one to one.
yep.
And I guess this is part of my soapbox, so apologies. But if you build it, they will not come. If you do not market it, no one's gonna buy your stuff.
Yeah, it's true.
They don't know you exist. They don't care. You have given them no reason to.
Yeah,
Um, and so that's kind of where getting everybody into that middle ground, into that safe space of working together based on facts, based on how we feel about facts,
yep.
and then deciding a path forward together, I think is what I'm hearing from you as the best way to go about this.
It is. And look, people might hear this and go, well, of course, that's what we do. I'll go back to that discussion I just had about that CRO is bringing everybody together and they're all working on their own spreadsheets, their own data sets. You're not really working together in that model. You're trying to, you're putting in the effort, but you haven't fully converted over to a truly unified front. And I think that's absolutely critical. I like what you call the two parent house kind of working together to raise the bookings in this case, um, right? It's got to be team play. It's a team sport, and finance is often look. Early in my career, I called finance the land of no. Every time I go there, they just said no, and over time, I had to realize I'm not talking their language. I'm not bringing them the data they need, right? They want revenue and cash. Okay, how do I show the build up to revenue and cash? This is what it looks like. And I think that's kind of incumbent on marketing and sales to learn how to do. It's incumbent on marketing and sales to pull that FP&A analyst or their designate into the conversations and say, let's talk this through. I'm not going to ask you for money right now. You don't get for money right now. We're just going to talk about how these things work together in structure, and let's come on that common playbook that we can all work against.
Yeah, it's that internal marketing and internal sales that
Yes.
like spreading the message of you gave me money, I did this with it, and now we got this.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's also, I'll add in, CEOs need to get in the game. By that, I mean, when marketing comes into the room to complain about sales, or sales about marketing, or marketing and sales about finance, the CEO needs to kind of push back. Hey, wait a minute. Are you guys working together on this? Are you guys in the room looking at these conversion points? Are you guys getting together? Don't come to me with problems if you aren't trying to solve them collectively as a team.
I love that. That is the thing I want everyone to hear again. So I'm just going to repeat it. Don't come to me with problems unless you got solutions that you're working on.
Yep, absolutely.
That is your motto mantra for every meeting you're ever going to have.
Yes,
It's just
yes.
don't sit there and complain. Like figure it out and then work together from there. But if you just sit there, no.
We are of like mind.
So okay, so but what if the CEO has to go out and he's busy, he or she or they are busy raising funds and they cannot get involved. Their day-to-day is getting the next round so that they can make finance happy so that the lights
Sure,
stay on.
sure.
How do we does there need to be a power vacuum or do you think that the onus is really on the practitioners?
I think the practitioner, I think there's two very strong thoughts that popped in my head. The first one is the practitioners have to figure it out. Get up, walk to somebody's office, set up the Zoom, have the conversation, break down the walls, start doing it, right? The just do it model. Um, and yeah, don't wait. Now, I will say, I love this when people say this is too hard, it's too much work to get all this together, the CEO might not be available. What goes into my brain is for a lot of SaaS software companies that are growing, 40% of revenue is allocated to sales and marketing budget. 40%, right? If 40% of revenue is allocated to something, the CEO better be deep into what's going on if he or she is talking to investors. You can't say, never mind, I'm fundraising. I don't have time for this for the next 6 months. That's a really bad plan, in my opinion. No offense to CEOs everywhere, but you can't abdicate that. Your teams need to do it, but you have to be the person there that can help steward, demand, push, nudge, encourage. That's part of your job, and you can't abdicate it.
Yeah, yeah. And then to double down on what you're saying is that I think that if you disagree, you should go sit in on a pitch session with investors
Yeah.
and listen to how they discuss the CEO after the CEO's done their pitch and left the room. Listen to what they say.
Yep.
And it's gonna be this guy doesn't know his numbers. This lady doesn't know what she's doing. This person doesn't like those projections are just fluff. Like that's baloney. That's not based on anything real. There's nothing to back it up. It's all spin because they can see through it. So if you are out there raising your next round, you got to care.
And if you built that giant financial model all the way back to leads and meetings, um, and oh, look at this great, this is a great math exercise in a spreadsheet. How is it executing? How's it working so far? What are the gaps? What are the risks? What's not working? Right? You can't learn that by reading a spreadsheet. You have to get in the room, roll up the sleeves. I worked at a company that had roots in lean manufacturing. I love the Japanese word gemba, which means where the work is done. Go to gemba, sit in on some of those meetings as a CEO. I'm just here to watch, observe, and listen. Do it as a CFO. I'm just here to watch, observe, see how we're doing. Understand how it works, right? Don't take it over. Don't shove your way onto the team, but then see where you can help, where you can add. You'll learn some really good stuff if you spend a little time where the work is actually done.
Yeah, and I think that that's just like a universal thing for everyone, right? When you're in school and you're in the classroom, the principal comes and observes, right? Like
Yes.
there's no world in which the person leading should not ever like check it out.
Yeah. A great example in another company I worked for, we wanted to do more customer marketing spend. So as part of that, some of the marketers went and sat at the help desk and listened to tier one support calls, right? What are the customers saying when they call in? What are they complaining about, right? Marketing could hear that firsthand and get a better view of how the customer felt and what they were dealing with before they started launching new marketing campaigns, right? That's probably right in your building, or at least you have access to it. Go to where the work is done.
Yeah, that speaks to my heart. I am like champion of talking to the customers. I think that this is because I'm a social first marketer, right? I
Mhm.
think that anywhere where you can capture the experience of the customer and then share it with the world is a high priority and one of the scrappiest, most foolproof ways to do marketing. Because if you have a happy customer, replicate it. Just
Yes.
keep doing that. No
Yes.
need to stop now. Tell everybody. Like that's
Exactly.
your job.
For
Um,
sure.
but yeah, you got to listen to how they talk, what they talk about, where their needs are, and that conversation, that dialogue with the customer, it translates into this model, right? So, one of the phrases that really I talk a lot about is once again business implications with personal outcomes.
Mhm.
And it's personal for your customer's experience. It's personal for how their day-to-day life goes, what they're working on, what they're not working on, what tools that you've sold them or that you're, like we're all people existing in interacting within systems.
Without a doubt.
And that's just how it is.
For sure. Yeah, well said.
Thank you for letting me rant on my what
Mutual ranting is always fun.
I'm here for the ranting. Um, so someone that would miss the point entirely is someone who's just like, it's too soon for us to have that sort of data. We just aren't there yet. We just can't figure it out, or we don't want to invest in it. Is that kind of like the people that this isn't a good fit for, or like tell me more about that.
Yeah, there may be a part where it's a little too early. If you're in the 0 to $1 million range and you're just trying to figure out who your customer is, you're constantly testing and iterating. Um, the CEO is almost the chief seller and marketer at that point, the founder, if you will. Um, it might be a little early at that point. I think by the time you get a little bit of scale, if you got a year's worth of bookings running, I think it's time to start formalizing these processes and building the muscle on how to do it early. You might not go to a full winning by design rollout of the bow tie and those kinds of things, but you might pick key components or facets of it and say, okay, we're going to start measuring here, here, and here. And we're going to start building the muscle to do this as we grow. And then I'd set inflection points. When we get to 5 million or 10 or 15, right, we're going to adjust. Then you get up to a point of scale, maybe 50-ish million, where you have to really be doing this well. That was the point where we were going for a C round and we, looking for big chunks of money, and investors wanted to know what was going on. They wanted to know that it had been working, right? So what's the history there? So yeah, at some point it's too early. It's never too early to be thinking about it. It's never too early to challenge yourself. Are we having the right conversations at least and sharing information? But I think you probably have to have at least a year's worth of decent kind of consistent data before you can really begin to operationalize, because until then you're hoping you're finding product market fit. You are trying really hard to get deals done. Keeping the lights on is more important than anything else, right? We're always robbing Peter to pay Paul in that scenario.
Yeah. I think that's a really great insight, is that you have to be able to think about it early and establish like an intention that you're going to have, like, and it comes back to enforcing culture too, right? Because you have to enforce the culture of this matters now, And this is how we're going to talk about it. As we grow, the depth of this is going to grow.
Yep.
Um, and really having it start at that starting point of like, in our culture, we always use the same word. MQL is a universally agreed upon definition in this organization, blah,
Yep.
blah, 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 blah. And the way that you're going to input it into this thing later should start early. Otherwise, then you have change management. And then you have
Yep. Well, and I've always been a fan of building a roadmap that says, hey, at scale, we're starting up now, but we'll get to 10 million and we're going to measure all these things.
Yeah.
So as leaders of function, start thinking now about how you're going to collect that data, right? This is going to be important, and here's why. And when we cross 10, I'm making that number up right now, we're going to turn these things on and start looking. So start thinking, start collecting, getting ready. We're going to move to measurement and make it a standard part of our cadence at this point. Let the business know it's coming. It's always terrible when you say, all right, we've hit this point. I want to know all these things. And they go, what? You didn't tell me. I haven't been storing that data, right? We changed the marketing automation system. We changed the CRM system. It's all gone, right? Make sure the team's on board early.
Yeah, and those are two real scenarios that would impact this is the change of platforms and tech stack as you grow.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the data is just lost to the ether or it doesn't map the same definitions. And so where you were measuring it prior to 2017, we're just gonna make up numbers.
Yep.
Where you're measuring it prior to 2017 is no longer how it's measured in 2024.
Yes.
And that definition changed, but the data changed too because there was never data collected that means the same MQL or SQL or even just different staging.
Or,
Um,
yeah, or
yeah,
the CRO reorganizes the sales force every year. This year we had small business and enterprise. Next year we got small business, mid-market, general business, enterprise. Third year we didn't like general business, we collapsed, right? But nobody's tracked where things sat and how they moved and how they could be arranged. And then somebody says, well, I want to know how we fed the inbound team and the small business for the last 3 years. Well, I don't know.
yeah, me too. I'd love to know that. You tell
Exactly.
me. Oh my god, my face just went through a wave of emotions. If you were just listening to this, I was like, "Oh my god, this sounds like a nightmare. Don't do that."
Totally.
Um, but it's a real problem. It happens, and there's very valid reasons for that happening.
Sure,
So
yeah.
I'm not trying to be as judgmental as my face was. But it's rough.
It's really rough, but at least if the team knows these data points are going to be important. As we grow, I want to be tied them back. I call them dimensions, which is an amalgamation of segment, geography, channel, product line, whatever you want to call them to make up your dimensions. Um, I'm going to want to be looking as the CEO and founder of this company, these dimensions for the next 5 years. So yes, we're going to change go-to-market. Yes, we're going to add segments. But when we do that, I want to talk to somebody and say, how do we organize the data so I can still have that information? Is that adding fields in the CRM? Is that an export? I don't know the answers. That's not my job necessarily to figure out. My team needs to because we're going to want to see that data. It tells our story in a very real way.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to trust your team. You got to
Yeah.
have a good group of people that are good at what they do and that you trust that they're good at what they do.
Yes,
With enough knowledge about what they do to be dangerous, but not to be the practitioner at all times for every single thing.
exactly. And on that CEO or any C-level role, don't expect them to read your mind. Get there early and say, these are the things I care about on a 3-year horizon. Let's make sure we're teed up to measure them. But this year, we're going to focus on these 2 or 3 because that's most important. That's perfectly fine. But expose the larger plan so they can plan for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's a really great example of leadership and setting the intention, setting the expectation, and communicating through it.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, if we're breaking down silos, you have to do those things. You have to communicate, express intentions, and express expectations. Because
Exactly.
nobody's a mind reader, up, down, sideways. It's just not how. It's not. It's not what we can do. Um,
I always hope they'll read my mind, but they never do. So yeah, no.
it's it's so funny. Marketers were expected to read minds, right? Salespeople, but really, we're just really good at decoding things. So we've kind of talked through that people need to base this. That there's this ideal way to do it. We've talked through some ways where this just gets absolutely like not demolished, but like just if there's like all of these CRM changes and all of these platform changes, and if the data isn't protected, its
Mhm.
integrity gets, there's no such good thing as perfect data. But if
Correct.
the integrity of the data is heavily like messed with, then it's really rough to then make reliable predictions from. Um what am I missing? Am I missing anything?
No, I think you hit on the key things. For me, on the data, on a 3-year horizon, if we're 80% accurate or better, we're directionally correct, and it's not gonna be perfect. There are gonna be gaps and dips. Um, the one thing that bark a lot about too, that's not as relevant, but you know, people get so caught up in forecasting and making this month and next month. Just watch out for the whole organization dragging you down right now into December and January. Um, when I worked at Salesforce, fiscal year ends January 31st. It was hard to find a soul in sales thinking about Feb 1 or later, right? Everybody's tuning out, just trying to get to this point. You have to fight. You have to pick your head up right now and say, how am I going to do in April of next year? If 10% of your brain power goes to that, as a sales and marketing team, maybe a little more marketing, but minimum in sales, you're going to be much better off for it.
I agree completely. You cannot rob from your future to make a goal by a certain date unless it's a matter of stopping the bleeding and
Yep.
keeping your company alive. Like that is it has to be like the highest level threat that and I know that these are really volatile times and sometimes it is. But what you can do as a marketer and what you can do as a salesperson is you can try to not burn things, right? So that's never okay to like just blow up someone's inbox and phone and da 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 and just oversaturate the ads and there is still a line. Like even if you're trying to stop the bleeding, even if it is mission critical to keep the lights on, you can't do things that are just gonna never work. They're just not like there's best practices can be a bit of a myth, but there are for sure some worst practices that are very solidly defined.
For sure, without a doubt.
The future. We talked a little bit about the future and making sure that people have one. What is
Yeah.
where's the future of marketing going? And do you think that's the same as where it should go?
Yeah, great question. I could talk about AI because everybody talks about AI everything. I do think AI is going to have a big impact on outbound. I think it's already being really abused, quite frankly. Hey, I've got 17 AI SDR agents spamming email boxes right now with domains I've warmed up. It's just teaching us all to spend less time looking at email. LinkedIn's getting harder to sort through for messages. I send messages to other CEOs now and say I'd like to talk to you, and they don't ever get to them anymore. It's hard, right? So AI is something we got to watch and figure out how to do better. I'll be really curious to see how that impacts staffing. For my company, I built 80% of my personas using Chat GPT and a little bit of research and got off to a really fast start. Are they great? No, but it's such a good head start. So I think how we use AI overall and how that impacts staffing and where we expect to start work from versus what's pre-built, I think is going to be really interesting. Um, I think marketing is going to spend more time on brand building. We kind of talked earlier about how that's something that finance doesn't always like to see. Um, but people are going to spend more and more of their time in this AI world making decisions before they ever talk to a seller or anybody else in your company. And so how they view your brand, how they interact with your content, how they engage with you before they talk to you. Look, we already know what's important. It's going to become even more important. So I think there's going to have to be a lot of investment of time there. And I think there's going to be better go-to-market alignment around the forecast. Too often, look, I'm a sales guy by birth. I'm a CEO now, but I've been in that chair where it feels like you're all alone because you've got the bookings number hanging over your head. And I think we're proving these days that a single person with a bookings number can't save the day. It takes a team to get this done. And if it's not a team, if it's not an aligned entity working as one, the CRO will fail, and you'll have a new CRO in 17 months, and they'll go through a whole bunch of change again, and nobody will get anywhere. So I think in this world of AI, how we resource is going to change. I think this will be really important for us to go back to brand building so that we can be seen and heard the way we want to be. We just got to behave as a team. I'd probably beat it like a dead horse on this discussion, but it's more critical now than it ever was, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's some really great insights there, and that teamwork really does make the dream work.
Yep.
I cannot think of a single industry, organization, anything, anywhere where teamwork is negligible.
Yep.
We are social animals. We are not meant to be by ourselves. We will literally, that's how you torture people, is by sitting them all by themselves in a room.
Yep.
Right. So, why would we think that we would be successful at business that way?
Yep.
It doesn't, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 in that sense. To make this a lot more lighter, let's talk about how much I agree with you on brand and once again, social and podcasting
Yes.
and all of these these lift kind of motions are part of how we work as people and how we bring people in. And once again, this one of my many soapboxes personally is just bringing people in.
Yep.
Because that's how it exists.
Yep. Yeah. Completely agree. Bring people in, have the conversations, work together, and just don't give it lip service. So many times I hear people say, "Yeah, we do that." You double click on it. Yeah, you're kind of happy. Can we really do it? Can we really do it? Challenge yourself. Am I really that close with this team? Can I have really frank conversations without people getting offended because we're talking about data? Hey, here's the problem, right? I'm a big believer in fail fast. Come to me and say, we're failing right here. I'll say, you're awesome. You found it fast. Thank you. Celebrate. Failure point. This is awesome, right? Let it sit for 2 months and spoil and rot. I'm going to lose my stuff. That didn't help. So encourage a culture where you're all together. And when somebody points out a flaw, embrace it. Get excited. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know we were failing right there. I will literally say that in a meeting. That's cool. Thank you. Right. It's a different mindset, but I'm a big believer in it.
Yeah. And that's where that like where we can take that on a personal level is having that ability to take that that candid feedback.
Yep.
Right. And not get defensive about it, and to allow ourselves to be like, that made me uncomfortable. Why did that make me uncomfortable? And then working through our own stuff so that we can be receptive and then all work towards this common goal.
Yep.
But I live here in, a wonderful, optimistic environment where I think that we all actually do want each other to succeed. I don't really honestly believe that at people's core that they're trying to be bad. I think that people are good and that sometimes their version of good, they're doing the best they can, that they need more resources or support or knowledge or patience or a snack. Like, sometimes people just need a snack and a nap, right?
Yes.
But when we view ourselves and everyone around us as doing the best they can, we can operate as better team members.
Without a doubt. And I am with you. I believe most people are good. I really do. I believe most people want to collaborate. They want to work together. I just think we have to challenge ourselves to make sure we really are. Go back to that CRO. What I really have is finance not in the room and 3 people with their own spreadsheets. Timeout. We're not quite really working together yet as well as we could. Let's fix that.
Yeah. Yeah. In that opportunity for better, right?
Yes.
There's always opportunity for better.
Here.
All right. The biggest question yet. This is our wrap-up question. That is somehow, even with the preparation, one of the hardest ones to answer. What is a question someone should ask you, but they don't?
Yeah, it's a great question. I knew it was coming, and you're right. It's the hardest one to answer. The one that I will share is probably my own insecurities. Being honest with you, hey Darren, what makes you qualified to be the founder of a company? Yes, you managed $100 million P&L in one place. Yes, you work at great companies. What makes you qualified to start at zero? Why would an investor want to give you money? And I worry about that every single day. And I've started talking on LinkedIn about mistakes I made. Shoot, my background let me down here. My background let me down there. And I'm trying to be open about it. But nobody has ever asked me that. Why do you think you're the right guy to found this thing, or the right person to found this thing? My answer was I always wanted to try it. Way back when I walked into that software company and said I'll be a receptionist, I knew I wanted to be a software company CEO someday. Knowing you want to doesn't make you qualified to necessarily. But that's my, I guess, honest response and my own insecurity shared very publicly.
I appreciate it. That is a big one, because it's this, most people that have never been in your shoes think that someone who founds a company or is a CEO, they think that that person has a certain level of like arrogance almost.
Yep.
And having talked to numerous founders, I can honestly say the most common thread amongst them is imposter syndrome.
Yep. For sure.
And the higher you go, the more prevalent imposter syndrome is. And that's because we know that there's this huge, huge ceiling above us. And we're all grasping for it. But, it's you have to push through it. I love that I'm stuttering. Like, because the lesson is that whether or not you think you can, you're right. But also
Yes.
do it anyways.
Exactly. Like, I knew it was going to be hard. I knew it was going to be challenging. I knew it was going to make mistakes. But I wanted to go for it. And I'm so glad I did. I'm having a ball. And I encourage other people to reach for their ultimate desire, whether you want to be the CEO of a Fortune 10 company or you want to be the founder of your own business. Go for it. Work towards it. Stretch yourself. When you tell yourself you can't, tell yourself to shut up, because you can. You just got to lean in and go do it.
Yeah. And you can also try it out thinking it was one thing and then just be like, whew, that was a mistake, and move on with a new dream. No one's going to tell you how to live your, plenty of people will tell you how to live your life.
Somebody will.
Somebody will tell you how to live your life. But it's your life. And I think that that's really where we have this amazing, amazing thing that we could do with ourselves is pick a dream and follow it.
Exactly right. Yeah, for sure.
Or at least try.
Yes.
All right. So if someone wanted to get a hold of you or find you, where can they do that? How?
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn really easily. I'm Darren Lauda, DAREN LAUDA. It's on the screen. Didn't need to spell it. Our company website is outsetops.com, like operations, but outsetops.com. You can find me there. We're still at a spot where I'm looking at every email that comes in. I'm, kind of, if the phone rings, I'm listening to the voicemails, so I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I love to have conversations. I love to help others if I can. So I'm happy to talk about what we do. I'm happy to offer advice, to help. Just love being a part of the broader go-to-market community.
Awesome. I appreciate that. My name is Leanne. You can find me also on LinkedIn, chronically online, as that social first marketer. If you want to find me an email, I use info@markigy, markigy.com. And that is the best way to get a hold of me, besides, the socials. All right. And so thank you. I appreciate everybody that's listening. I appreciate you, Darren, for joining me. And always like, review, subscribe, tell your friends, all of that classic stuff I'm supposed to say at the end. Thanks.